Welcome, everyone. We're excited to have another CNO Roundtable event today. Um, we've created this CNO, which is the Chief Network Officer Roundtable, really to have a forum for executives who lead, deliver, build, optimize provider networks for members and patients. Um, we have covered a lot of ground to date, and we're pretty excited about today's topic, which is really all focused on the member. So today's topic is patient stories for network strategies, putting members first. And so we'll get really focused on the member today. Previously, we actually focused on the provider experience. And we actually started this series, which we're doing all throughout the month of May, with a focus on the CNO role itself. So we're pretty excited for today's conversation. Couple of quick logistics before we kick off. One is we will, as usual, take Q&A at the end. So please, if a thought or a question pops into your head, don't hesitate to put it right in the kind of Q&A panel, which you should see at the bottom of your screen. Again, we'll get to those questions at the very end. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in with introductions. Scott, I'll ask you to introduce yourself first, just maybe a little bit about your experience and background, and if you'd like a fun fact for the audience, and then we'll hear from Jeff.
Sure. Scott VandeSand. I am with a company called Karna, and I am a senior director and deputy program manager on Karna's World Trade Center Health Program Support contract. So we provide third-party administration services to the federal government's World Trade Center Health Program, including, among other things, we build, optimize, and operate a provider network in and around the New York metropolitan area. And that extends out to geographies where we have membership outside of New York. Just in terms of my history, I started my career in the early 2000s working in managed healthcare account management. So I worked with large employer groups, and it really provided me kind of a broad-based experience and perspective on the entire health plan operations landscape, everything from how we leverage, how plans leverage their networks and benefit structures to kind of market and set themselves apart in the marketplace, to operations and customer service and issue resolution. So everything there. After several years, I went into the federal government space. So spent about 5 years supporting TRICARE and Defense Health Program on really kind of beneficiary focused technologies. It was kind of the start of TRICARE Online and having beneficiary portals and how we engaged beneficiary populations kind of in their healthcare, providing benefits more directly to the beneficiaries. I spent some time after TRICARE on kind of general healthcare and healthcare IT consulting, software development, focused primarily in the federal market space, but also doing some kind of nonprofit support. And then in 2017, I joined Karna in the World Trade Center and have been focused on that program ever since. In terms of a fun fact, so I know I was on for the first call a couple weeks ago, and there were several May birthdays. So I'm also May birthday. My birthday was Sunday, the 18th.
Happy birthday.
Thanks.
Right there with Jeff, who also has a May birthday. Jeff.
Somebody got me a seat on the CNO roundtable for my birthday.
That's great.
Go Taurus. Let's
Yeah.
go. Jeff Fritz, CEO of Andros. Super excited for this conversation today. My background is in all in healthcare, from commercial self-funded medical plans to some employee benefits that translate like in the financial and healthcare marketplace. My roles have typically been leading teams and organizations around technology platforms and trying to rethink how platforms perform for the healthcare ecosystem. And Andros is no different. Andros is a really exciting place for me and my colleagues to work in and really get after this provider network optimization for a lot of the constituencies in healthcare. Fun fact, I went to school, I went to college, I was an aerospace engineering major. So I ended up being pretty good at math, and I got shepherded into aerospace engineering, Air Force ROTC. I thought I was going to be flying planes for the Air Force and doing aerospace work. And thankfully for me, around my sophomore year, before I signed my contract with the Air Force, I had a job visit and found out that was not the kind of work that was going to speak to me for the rest of my life, and I pivoted into business. And so here I am, enjoying a really great career in healthcare solutions and technology. All right, Louise, take us away.
Great. Well, Scott, I would guess there are some people in the audience here who consider themselves really expert in federally funded healthcare who are now questioning everything because they're like, I've never heard of Karna, right? So you are a unique program, a unique organization. So I'm wondering if you could just give people a little bit more background on how this health plan originated, and in particular the population you guys are serving. When you talk about World Trade Center
Sure.
survivors, tell us what that means.
Sure. So let me talk both a little bit about Karna and then the World Trade Center Health Program that we support. So um, Karna kind of was established as a small business in the Atlanta area, focused predominantly on support of CDC public health mission. And back in 2017, Karna was lucky enough to win a small business contract in support of the World Trade Center Health Program. It was Karna's first foray into kind of that TPA type services. In 2018, we were procured by or acquired by Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina. So we are now a wholly owned subsidiary of Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina. Our sister organizations are companies like Palmetto GBA, CGS, who are both large MACs. PGBA is another sister organization, does a lot of work in TRICARE, support of the TRICARE Prime contractors. So, we are still very agile and nimble at heart at Karna, but have access to those kind of broader Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina resources and sister organizations as well. The World Trade Center Health Program that we support was created in 2011 by a piece of legislation called the Zadroga Act. And that created a federal health program to provide medical pharmacy coverage for first responders and survivors of the 9/11 attacks. And it is a limited benefit health program. So the program pays as well. I'll simplify it. The program pays as primary for first responders for conditions that are directly related to their exposures around 9/11. And then there's also a survivor program where the program pays as secondary to other private or federal health insurance that survivors have. But again, it's just coverage for those conditions related to members' exposures.
Wonderful. Thank you for that overview. I'm sure a bunch of people in our audience learned quite a bit. Today, we're going to focus a lot on, like we said, the member experience, and in particular, how plans and networks can really adapt to specific populations. So, Scott, maybe you could continue giving us just a little bit more background here. Help people understand what are some of the things that might be unique to your specific population, whether it's socially, clinically, behaviorally, that really make your population unique.
Sure. So I think what's unique about our population is really that shared trauma. Um, so, everybody, whether they were a first responder working the pile or if they were a survivor that lived or worked in the area, they have some residual physical and or mental health trauma. So as we as we build networks, as we design benefits, as we operate the health plan, we really have to keep that in mind. So there's a large portion of what we do that's educating our internal staff, our providers that we contract with on what that shared trauma was. Because 2001 is a long time ago. We have a lot of staff that weren't born in 2001. So understanding the geographies of Manhattan and the Pentagon, what people saw, what they experienced, and really keeping that in mind as we're developing solutions to help these members is important, and unique. I think there are some challenges that we have in designing and operating TPA services in support of the program. One is that limited benefit nature. So, for us, things like network adequacy aren't just defined by ubiquitous access to every type of service conceivably needed. We only cover certain things for certain people. So understanding the real actual clinical needs of our members dictate what type of a network, what type of specialties we need in certain geographies. And that kind of leads into that second challenge, which is geographies. So, we have a big kind of focus of membership in the New York metro area. It's called the World Trade Center Health Program. That's where a lot of our members are. But there were first responder teams that came from every area of the country to work the piles. There's been, kind of migration of folks away from the New York area to other areas of the country as they retire, snowbirds, and things like that. So it's knowing where our members are, where they're going, and how we kind of evolve benefits and networks to kind of meet that ever-changing need of kind of the mesh of geography and kind of individual care needs.
It's really helpful and it's really important work. And I think as we're talking today, right, we'll keep kind of coming back to this theme of adapting the network or personalizing the network. Some people may be thinking, oh, there's some things that are different about the Karna program from mine, right? The fact that you're only covering sort of some conditions. So Jeff, I actually want to throw a question your way. I'm actually thinking too, I'm wondering if there are things that we can learn from other industries. Maybe they even have a very broad product offering or they have a very broad kind of population that they serve, but they've kind of found ways to personalize, to adapt, to deliver resources with precision. Do you think there are things that you've seen in your career and your exposure to the other industries that folks could also be applying?
Yeah. What I like to talk about banking. I think banking in the financial services sector had a real change in how they service their customers when they started to compete not on their data, but what they do with data. And so the formation of Fair Isaac or FICO and the FICO scoring system and the portfolio scoring system allowed financial institutions to start to tailor their product sets to the members, to specific members, using a real rich view of who those memberships were. So if I wanted to offer a credit program to a certain neighborhood within the Minneapolis area, I could start to see how could I shape the offer and the benefits to the right people and really match them where they are. Where before I would kind of spray and pray, just kind of junk mail everybody and hope that I get the right people in, and then I'd have to manage the risk differently than a very targeted, tailored approach to mapping my product or service to the specific needs of a certain population. So I think they just did a really nice job as an industry to kind of accept that we're all gonna we're all gonna build better products and services that are tailored to the people that we serve if we stop hoarding our view of populations.
I love that example too. I think you see really great examples in retail and all kinds of places we can take some inspiration from. So,
Hmm.
Scott, I'm wondering if you can bring this back into kind of the health plan space.
Sure.
So,
So
right, the problem, as people often describe it, is personalization at scale. How do I start to personalize my network or personalize my services given the kind of scale you have. Even if you're, a regional plan, you've still really got quite a lot of scale you're trying to deliver against. So do you
Sure.
have any advice there for health plans that are thinking about that? And maybe you can give some
Yeah,
examples of the kind of things you guys are thinking about.
sure. So let me pull the thread a little bit though on kind of that kind of other industry analogies. So, I think the banking industry that Jeff brought up is a good one. We kind of think about it as kind of the Amazonification, right? It's so, Amazon came about and they were competing with brick and mortar facility, Walmarts and department stores that would, kind of preposition one of the things they thought people were buying. But Amazon is really more of a data company, right? And they were focused more on mining consumer behaviors and looking at trends, and they were able to pre-position products in warehouses where, now as a consumer, I'm not bound by what the department store has on the shelf, right? I can get what I want in the specification that I want, that I need within a day or two. And I think that that's changed consumers' expectations of services as well. So I think in the healthcare marketplace, healthcare consumers expect to be able to access the providers they need when they want to. And if they can't, they're not happy. So I think that, we see that and we really do kind of try to take a similar approach to Amazon, really looking at our data and trying to understand our consumer behaviors, trying to, look at claims history, what, and segment our population into different cohorts. So, can we look at members with certain diagnosis codes, claims histories? We have some advantages in the way that the program is structured that help us do that. But I think, even without knowing that a member is certified for certain conditions, we could still look at claims history to see kind of what types of services they've been looking at. But then can you use that to make some forecasted estimates of what the future needs going to be, right? So if I see a cohort of members that are on high blood pressure medications and statins, even if they're just getting those from their primary care, is that an indicator that I need to grow cardiology in certain geographies aligning to those kind of emerging needs? Or if I see BMI is raising, do I need endocrinologists because these folks I'm forecasting are pre-diabetic and are going to need to seek care in certain areas? So and I think in terms of where you can't look at the individual, right? So I can't look at an individual and say, this person's going to need this, but if I can extrapolate it to a population, I think that helps, right? So I can start to make educated guesses at a population level that help kind of steer some of my strategy and priorities. Is
I
that,
love that, Scott. I
yeah,
love that, Scott. And that emergers is I think about that a lot. Like, how can how can you have a chance at bending that cost curve if you can't recognize patterns of the past to predict what is likely the patterns of the future? So how do I if I if I if I can't see um, what the precursors were to these different states, then I'm just shooting in the dark, and I
right.
really don't have any aiming mechanisms. So I think you guys are actually on the front edge of using data and analytics and prediction to um, predict what the needs are of this very unique population and have a chance of uh, changing the efficacy of this network to meet the patients not just where they are but where they will be.
Exactly.
And that's really important. And I think the healthcare the broader healthcare systems are going to learn a lot from seeing folks like you take that real um, smart analytical approach to member satisfaction and mapping them
Sure.
to the networks.
Sure. And it's been kind of an evolution and a change process for us, right? I mean, our we've been in this TPA role again since 2017. And when we started in this role, we were kind of reactionary, right? So um, there's more structure and a lot of different stakeholders in the World Trade Center Health Program. A lot of the kind of primary care and care coordination for members are provided by entities called clinical centers of excellence, or CCEs. So when we started, we were really reactive to the CCEs telling us there was a need, right? So we would, and that was the way our contract was written, right? It was the CCEs that had the relationship with the members. And when the members asked for service and there wasn't network capacity there to serve them, the CCEs would tell us, and then we would go out and recruit to fill the need. And we've really made a concerted effort to try to flip that as much as we can. We still rely on that partnership, right? We rely on the CCEs to tell us where we have kind of emergent gaps that need to be addressed in the moment to make sure the members can get the care they need. But again, we've been trying to find ways to be more proactive and put those resources where we believe they're going to be needed before anybody has to ask us.
I think you hit the nail on the head. That's come up as a theme in both our first and second sessions, actually, is just that flip from being really reactive to being proactive. And you guys are doing that, which is amazing. I'm curious too, Jeff. I want to send this next question your way. Um, what Karna's doing is awesome, right? And is sort of on the leading edge here of how do we use analytics to predict what memberships will need. And I'm going to go back to the Amazon example a little bit, right? Amazon does
Mhm.
similar things with its data. It will predict that you're about to order something and will actually quietly behind the scenes actually start shifting supply, right? To make sure that you can get it within 1 or 2 days. Um, the hardest problem, though, in retail in that world is often people call it the last mile of delivery problem. It's the actual delivery, right? It's the actual ops. It's the how do I get this package all the way to your door? That's where things get really complicated. Do I use a drone? Okay, somebody's got a long winding driveway. It's the delivery piece is hard, and that's often a place where you pay the burden or you pay the price of this sort of personalization. So I'm wondering if you have any advice or any thoughts on, upfront, we can make our strategy adaptable, we can make our strategy personalized, but how do you get your whole delivery machine and your
Mhm.
delivery mechanism ready to align to that strategy to be personalized and adaptive?
Yeah, I think it starts with where the care is being delivered. And this sounds like a tagline that a lot of people throw out there, but that in that quadruple aim, so much focus has been on cost and quality. Cost first, then quality. And what is coming to head is this provider experience and member experience. And I think Karna is in a unique position as somebody who works with a lot of different plans and networks. Karna is in a unique, they're almost like the responder to the responders. So you have this mission-based focus that is around first responders and impacted individuals of the events of 9/11, and you have this unique ability to kind of drive that mission through to the patient and member experience that has real impact and power. And I think the winners of the broader healthcare ecosystems are going to find ways to unlock that connection beyond cost, beyond generic quality measures into really patient and provider experiences. Um, we see so much of member experience and provider experience be reactive, grievance based inbound reactions. And I think the ability, what Scott is doing with Karna and how they're shaping the ability to predict and be ahead, it's almost like an outbound touch to say, this is how important this is. I want to make sure you, the patient, are met with the best care from you, the provider. Um, I don't know if that answered your question directly, but that's where my head was going as Scott was talking and when you queued the question up.
Yeah, and Louise, so a couple of threads to pull there too. So I think it is, we're in a unique position where our quadruple aim, right, is maybe turned on its head a little bit from other plans. So we are really focused on member beneficiary experience. I mean, the whole reason that the health plan is there is to care for these members and to pay a debt to the first responders and survivors that the country owes them. So that is first and foremost. Quality and provider experience are very important. Cost is important from a fraud, waste, and abuse perspective, and being a good steward of taxpayer money. But it's the program's not here to make a profit or to minimize expense. It's to provide benefit to the members. So it's about making every dollar the program spends provide maximum benefit.
Yeah.
So our quadruple aim, I think, is a little bit different. But
Yeah.
Louise, your original question was how to operationalize this, and I think that is a challenge. And I think that we've done it in a couple of different ways. So one is really understanding kind of the data science aspect of this, right? And that data science and analytics is not, right? It's not a bunch of nerds in a closet. They need to be integrated into your operations team, right? And the operations team needs to understand the importance of data and understanding their data and seeing how we can make inferences and gain intelligence from the data, right? The data is not just something that they create by performing a process. It's informative and can feed back into make what they're doing more efficient and effective. I think the other aspect of that is this notion of the provider network lifecycle management platform, right? Your last mile of delivery for network development is outreach and recruitment and contracting. So if there are ways that we can use platforms like, the ARC platform that Andres is developing to automate and streamline, but what were really high cost, high labor intensive activities when we were right, if we're acting reactively, or if I'm just doing a shotgun approach to enroll every provider that exists in a geographic area, I don't need intelligent automation so much, right? I can afford to hire an army to do these things. But if I'm looking for a specific specialty in a geographic area times 1,000, I need automation to be able to make that cost effective. So I think that provider network lifecycle management platform becomes key. So those are really kind of the two ways in which we're trying to change our operational organization to succeed here.
Yeah.
I like that. I think there's a question in the QA that I'm just gonna hit on right now, that where do I start on that? And I think what you're hitting on, Scott, is this uh factoring. You're factoring. How do I treat different types of members, patients, and how do I treat different types of providers or practitioners? And a very simple factoring, let's put them into four different buckets, um and that and treat those four different buckets slightly different, gives you a resource allocation that becomes a little bit more efficient. And then as you start to split those in two groups and you have a test and learn approach, that learning starts to shape, do I have the right four, um, and you start to really dial in how your resources are spent to better accommodate the needs, the predictive needs that Scott's talking about around experience for members and for practitioners.
Right. Yeah. And I would like, how do you start small? Right. Like,
Right.
yes, this needs to be a change in kind of strategically how an organization thinks about their network management, but start with, try to make it a small problem. Look at one geography and one specialty, right? Is it mental health or,
Great advice.
some other thing in one geography? And can I apply some of these analytic tools to understand that market, understand that problem, forecast out need, enroll what worked, what didn't work. How can I take those lessons and expand my problem to larger geographies or another specialty? And
That's
I,
great
I think that,
advice.
right, that's how it's got to be iterative, and you grow it, and before you
Form that
know,
muscle, form that
right,
muscle slowly.
right, and then you can expand it out.
I
Network.
love that, Scott. I also something that you said is really sticking with me about making sure you get that same data you're using to inform your network design, your network strategy, like you were talking about, and actually putting it in the hand of operations. In the
Right.
first two sessions, one of the roles we talked about was provider relations group, which often struggle from this being really reactive, just kind of
Mm,
what's your problem? What do you need?
Right.
Trying to get, kind of thinking about like turnaround time as like your most important asset. Like, how fast can I answer your question? But right, giving them insight in the kind of things that you're looking at. Yeah, like how much of our population does this provider serve? You know what I mean? And now that we have them on the phone, is there anything else we need to know or they need to know or we should be talking to them about? So just starting to get a little bit of that same data that you're using to inform your network design strategy, I can see how that would start to become powerful in a delivery
It
context
is.
as well.
And look, we've been blessed. I have a great data science partner. And I said you need to get the data science embedded with operations, and that's at every level, right? So at kind of the program management, the top of our contract, I have a kind of a lead data scientist that understands the business of healthcare, that understands business. So to be able to talk business problems with the data scientist and them understand it, right? They're not just coming at problems from a data, they understand the business challenges with it. And they can talk to their data science team to make sure that their data scientists that are doing individual activities understand the imperatives of why they're doing it.
Mhm.
And then it's a challenge with the operators too, right? Making the operators understand that these data folks aren't just here to produce reports. This isn't static, numbers on a page. How do we train the operators to maximally utilize the insights that the data is providing us? It is, I mean, there's been a lot of education, a lot of growing pains in doing it. But it really I mean, you can teach old dogs new tricks. Um, and we've seen a lot of success with it.
Wonderful. And let's double click just a little bit there. I'm curious, when you think about KPIs, so when you think about network performance and what you're measuring, and using that as a way to really measure the member experience or to measure how the network is performing for members, what are you looking at currently, or what are you aiming to look
Yeah.
at?
Um, so that's a challenge, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it really kind of goes back to Jeff's comment, right? Of um, you used to know if you were doing good or bad by abrasion and how much people complained. And I mean, in a lot of cases, that's still the case, right? What we want to see is a reduction in the number of calls telling us I can't find a provider, or we want to see a reduction in the number of times we get urgent last minute requests from a CCE saying, I've got a member in Paducah, Kentucky that needs this. And if we're not getting those calls because our forecasts and kind of strategic network development has anticipated those needs, I think we'll see a reduction in kind of those negative calls, those urgent requests for help. The program does kind of do member satisfaction surveys on a fairly regular basis, so we do benefit from that as well. They ask questions related to our performance and the performance of services that we provide. So we get some of that too. But I think really the real time indicator is the reduction in complaints
Mm.
and service requests.
That makes a ton of sense. Jeff, what are you seeing from your perspective and in your conversations? What do you think plans are looking at or could be looking at here?
um, I just a lot of what Scott just said resonates with me is what people are looking at, like quieting the noise. And I think the ones that are tailoring different member experience tracks based on who they are and what they're trying to accomplish, are going to see a better result because they're tailoring the experience. So uh, if I'm a patient or a member that's moved into a rural community and my access is a little different than if I'm in the New York metropolitan area, factoring that into how I measure the experience of that member. Um, in New York, they might have complained about, the 20-minute drive time that was 1 mile away, and in Idaho, that they might complain that it's an hour drive time because that's the closest CCE that's available in
Right.
that general area. So factoring for that, you kind of set your expectations and your bars a little bit differently, and you can kind of reinforce to the member and to the providers that you are in fact providing good service based on the circumstances of where the meeting the member and the provider where they're at or where they will be.
Yeah. And actually, you both made reference to it. Jeff, you just made reference to it again. I actually think, Scott, that might be something interesting for our audience to hear a little bit more about is the CCEs. Certainly other health plans have the idea of a center of excellence. We go to, this institution is the best for back pain or
Sure.
and you guys really, it means something a little different, right?
It
It's a
does.
very unique concept. I'd love to hear more about that. Is that something members like? Is that something that helps you with kind of your mission and vision?
Sure. So just a little bit of a history lesson here then on
Mhm.
World Trade Center. So
Yeah.
I mentioned before that the Zadroga Act created the World Trade Center Health Program in 2011. Prior to that, there were kind of a series of federal grants that were given to um, hospitals, health systems, educational organizations that operate health systems, the Fire Department of New York, all kind of in and around New York City. So there were grants given to to care for these members and first responders in different kind of cohorts. So when the Zadroga Act was passed, it retained kind of those grantee organizations as clinical centers of excellence. So they really do manage individual cohorts of patients. So like FDNY manages active duty fire department, and some retirees stick with the fire department. They operate a clinic within their headquarters that do screening and monitoring, and then they refer out for care. There's other CCEs, Mount Sinai, Health and Hospitals of New York, SUNY, Rutgers, kind of a big group of clinical centers of excellence. They act really as kind of a primary care physician, again, providing the screening and monitoring services. They do a lot of diagnostic services, but they will refer out for a lot of complex care into our network.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of kind of division of responsibilities. We do kind of utilization management from a centralized standpoint, but the CCEs are really the ones that are coordinating care and providing case management. So, when when I say we get those requests from external, for a lot of health plans, that's going to be internal requests, right? It will be your internal case management and care coordination teams that are telling you what members need. We have to get that from an external entity. Um, but it really is kind of a collaborative. That's something that's really important to our success as well, is maintaining a really close working relationship, because those CCEs are the ones, they see the members, they interact with the members. We don't, right? We get claims, we get some calls to our call center, but we don't own the member relationship for the program. We rely on the CCEs for that.
Mhm. It's a
I
really
think
important relationship then between the
It
two of
it,
you.
it is super important.
Yeah.
we're seeing this in the value-based care arrangements that are popping up, where you're trying to share the risk of a cohort group of people within from the insurance company or the payer organization along with the provider organization or the group of providers, and the goal is to not just manage cost but to manage care
Right.
and experience. And I think it's a um, interesting study with the plan that you operate, Scott, because you have a very focused set of comorbidities that you're trying to watch out for, and you're setting up these CCEs, or in the risk bearing and just primary care, and you're trying to say, don't go out, don't start in the ER, start with this, because these people know what they're looking for on your behalf. And I think those lessons are still kind of new to a lot of value-based care arrangements, for other companies in the US.
No, I agree with that. Um, and I think, Louise, you also asked kind of how members, I mean, members do see themselves as belonging to a CCE, right? So
Mhm.
they are a member of the program, but their experience is really different depending upon the CCE that they belong to. They, you know, firefighters like that they go in and, they see clinicians that understand what firefighters deal with. Um, they understand, again, going back to the traumas experience on the day, those CCEs are experts in that, right? So they understand the unique types of cancer that our population are seeing. They understand the mental health traumas, the things that can be triggering. And that is a challenge for the program because I haven't really talked about it, but there is something called the nationwide program that is for members that have moved away from New York. And when members go from a CCE that, again, these brick and mortar facilities with people that all they see is World Trade Center, and they moved, again, I'll pick on Paducah, they moved to Kentucky and they're the only World Trade Center member in a 100-mile radius, and we're having to add providers. If we don't do a good job of training the providers and educating them on what World Trade Center is and what questions can trigger emotional trauma, for things that these people have seen, not only can it be not as rich of an experience for the member, it can be a negative experience for the member. So, those things, those are challenges I think that are somewhat unique to our program that we really need to think about. Um,
I mean, honestly, it's fascinating and it's really important and really compelling, that you're thinking about how important it is for these members and their experience that you want to shape the care and the knowledge and the understanding of individual providers, well outside of the New York metro area and across that national network. It's really, really impressive. And in fact, time flies when you're having fun. We're getting towards the end of content, but I want to let the two of you close out the content with some final thoughts. Scott, if you'd be willing, just one thing I sense, especially right now as you've been speaking, very strong sense of mission at Karna. So I'm wondering if you can just share with us a little bit of what it feels like to work at Karna every day, what it feels like to
sure.
serve the population you do.
Yeah, I mean, I've had the privilege in my career to, like I was at TRICARE, during the second Desert Storm. So it was active time of deployment, and it was really rewarding to, help support those military members and their families. Um, but it was always for a different reason, right? I mean, the primary purpose of defense health is to ensure readiness and that we have a fit fighting force. So, you felt like you were doing some good, but that was kind of always the secondary goal. I think in World Trade Center, it is all about the members, right? So there's a question in the Q&A of what do we do in working with the CCEs when there's a difference of opinion. I think the nice thing about World Trade Center, and Karna understands this and lives this, is it's all about the members, right? So we can put aside turf wars, we can put aside arguing for our opinion. If we see something that's in the best interest of the program and the members, our corporate organization supports that, right? So we design services so that they can be, easily transferred over to an incoming vendor if the program decides they want to move in a different direction away from us. And we do that purposefully. right? To benefit the members. We don't want to see gaps in continuity of care. We don't want to, try to position ourselves where we're the only option. We try to do what's in the best interest of the members always, and that is really, really rewarding. So it's mission first, and for the past 8 years, it's never been different. So
Yeah, I think it's wonderful, and that's why we wanted to have you with us today. Hopefully I'm not embarrassing Scott when I say this, but he was a little bit bashful when we first asked him to join the session, and he was being very diligent to say, "Now you know my job isn't directly member facing, and I'm not technically in member experience, right?" And I said, "Scott, everything that you do in your role and your whole organization does, I've been very impressed with how sort of member centric, how adaptable, how creative."
sure.
You guys are to really ensuring that member experience. So really, really the perfect guest to speak today.
On behalf
So
of Karna, we appreciate that.
yeah, we appreciate you. So last, we're great time to get your last minute questions into the Q&A because we're going to turn there in just a second. But I do want to give a chance for Jeff and Scott to just leave the audience with any final words again on the general topic, kind of call to arms to really think about doing right by members as we think about network design, as we think about creating better performing networks, as we think about the mandate for this chief network officer or people who have a role like that person. Jeff, what are the final thoughts you want to leave our audience with?
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to give Scott the final word because he's really shining here on his thinking. The thing that comes to mind is we're going from a healthcare delivery system of adequacy. And we actually use that term all the time when we talk about networks is what a perfectly named thing is. Let's just be adequate. And we're moving that to population-based thinking. And the best population-based thinking is personalized. When you get to how do we unlock this connection between a patient and a provider, it's very personal and it's very personalized. And so the top-down claims-based thinking around shaping networks and access to a bottom-up view of personalized care that helps people find the fit with the right provider that would do the best work for them and get the best outcome is really exciting, and it's an exciting transformation opportunity for our healthcare systems. And I think the place to start, which there were a couple questions around where do I start, is start thinking about what are some elements that give you clues that you're hitting that personalization and that connection between that better connection between a patient provider and that's where the technology of tomorrow can really help you shape how to predict to get the best out of personalization. So that's my final thoughts on that. Scott?
Yeah, no, I would agree, and I think kind of going back to something that Jeff said, right? It's about like how do you get started, and it's about kind of segmenting and trying to turn this big problem into addressable chunks, right? So it's really hard to come in and say, I'm going to look at all of my data. I'm going to completely understand all of my members' needs in every geography, and I'm going to put in a machine learning model that predicts where I'm recruiting tomorrow. Like you'll spend years and get nowhere, right? But if you can segment each of those mammoth problems into bite-sized chunks, one geography, one specialty, understanding the legacy data and how that legacy data maps to my current network. Can I make one or two, projections for what I think I will need in one or two specialty areas based on this? Learn from that. Did it work? Did it not? Expand it, expand it, expand it. Take all of those lessons learned, put that into a machine learning model, expand it, expand it, expand it. It is an iterative evolutionary change. It's not going to change overnight. You got to start small. But again, you will start to see insights that even before you're fully automated, you can use those insights to incrementally change operations and make better decisions. Even if you're still being 80% reactionary, it's still helpful, kind of on your journey along the way.
I love that. Great final thoughts. I have a advisor and friend who is a former United Health executive who always reminds me, Louise, how are we going to eat the elephant? One bite at a time.
Right.
So it's a good, it's a good reminder for folks as these small incremental steps can make a big difference if you just keep taking them.
Yep.
Well, you guys did a fantastic job actually of answering questions as they were coming up. We do have just a couple more in the chat. So again, if folks have additional questions, feel free to pop them in. One question coming up again is people just thinking, how do I take some of the things I'm hearing from Scott around CCEs or some of the things I'm hearing Scott say around, predicting what's changing in my population. How do I take that and really scale it up? If I'm a much larger, I'm a national health plan, what could that look like? So Scott, I'll let you chime in on that first, because I know you've had some street experience in different types of health plans. What are the things that you think you've suggested that maybe people could adapt generally for different types of health plans? And then Jeff, I'll let you kind of chime in on that as well.
Yeah. So again, I mean, I think it's going to go back to kind of finding ways to segment your problems and creating an edible bite of elephant, right?
Hmm.
And I think for a larger health plan, the first step in that is really understanding the challenges and what is the business case that I first want to deal with, right? Is it mental health in a certain geography? Is it that the network I'm offering limits my competitiveness in a certain region? What is the business case or a addressable business case that or business issue that I'm dealing with that might benefit from this? And and then it's kind of sitting down with your operators and your data scientists and your executive team and figuring out kind of what are the variables, how can we look at data, how do we have the data? um, it's a collaborative effort, right? This is not just something you can take in one sentence in an email and throw it over the fence to a data science team and say, fix my operation. It's got to be collaborative. And again, you start small and you learn. Um, so I think to me, that's it. It's finding the right business problem, business case.
Very good advice.
Yeah. I'll just add to that. The word orchestration is coming up more and more. Um, and I heard a good analogy when we were talking about orchestration, to Scott's point. Um, there are so many solution sets within these large organizations, lots of we call them point solutions, lots of systems that are discrete systems that are not well orchestrated with each other. But rather than trying to orchestrate them all, start with the first violin and the first trombone and try and get those two playing together. Uh, if it's data orchestration, see if you can orchestrate across those two systems first in a small, very meaningful problem set like Scott described, and you'll form that muscle to either expand the problem set across those two or add a third and see if you can get those three to play across an orchestration. So your orchestra starts very small as a three-person band, and eventually you can scale that up quicker by proving out that you can do it on a small scale.
I like that. Start with one discrete problem in a small band. It's great
Yeah,
advice. Perfect. Well, thank you both so much today for your insight and for your recommendations. I know I'm definitely taking a lot with me, and I personally love that we spent a whole session just really thinking about the member and what the member needs from our networks. I've
I
heard.
want to I want to thank Scott and all the work and his team. It's a mission-based organization, and as a member of our community here in the U.S., it's important for us to recognize that these are important programs that we as a federal organization support, and it's really appreciated how much heart you guys put into your work.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And I appreciate the opportunity. We appreciate the opportunity to speak. So thank you.
We'll have you back anytime, Scott. Well, a couple of quick notes and comments kind of for our audience. So this slide deck as well as the recording will be available. A reminder up on your screen, if you have any questions, if you would like to certainly attend the next session, you can always reach out to marketing@andros.co. Our next session will be on a Tuesday, as these always are, same time, same place. If you have any feedback for us, please again feel free to send it to that marketing email address. There will also, however, be an exit survey. So we really do read that carefully, and we try to, just like we're preaching here, we do try to adapt and be agile. So if you have any feedback about what we can do to make the next session even better, we would absolutely love to hear it. And again, that next session it is our fourth and final session. It will be next Tuesday, May 27th at 11 a.m. Central Time. It is Innovators in Action, Case Studies Shaping the Future of Provider Networks. It'll be very pragmatic. It'll be very focused on what people are really doing out in the industry, certainly like you were hearing from Scott today. So thank you all. Again, thank you both to Jeff and Scott. It's been a wonderful conversation, and I look forward to seeing everybody back here next week.
Thank you, Louise.
Bye.